Flip the Switch, your podcast for the latest on power, people, and the planet.
Welcome to Flip the Switch. I'm your host, Jaideep Mukherjee, Asia Executive Director for Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, in short, GAP. Flip the Switch is a podcast series where we exchange opportunities and ideas impacting our progress in achieving access to clean energy and reliable energy for all. We have with us today Ashwin Dayal, Interim CEO, GAP, and Joseph Nanga, Africa Executive Director, GAP. A very warm welcome to you both. At the just concluded COP26, we saw governments from more than 200 nations come together and present a common pathway to reduce emissions and accelerate climate initiatives. To make this commitment a reality, it is important that all key stakeholders rally behind and play their part in this transition. As economies accelerate, power needs among developing countries will significantly rise, and this demand needs to be fulfilled through a low-carbon pathway. Over the last few months, the Rockefeller Foundation, in partnership with the IKEA Foundation and the Bezos Earth Fund, have formed a unique coalition, the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. Launched at COP26, the alliance aims to aid and catalyze energy access, economic development, and energy transition across the developing world. The alliance will extend clean, productive use energy to 1 billion underserved people, creating 150 million green jobs and averting over 4 billion tons of emissions. I would like to invite you, Ashwin, here to throw light on this ambitious endeavor for the alliance. And how did it go at COP26? How was the launch received? And we had this announcement around this transformational country partnerships. I would like to hear your views and responses that you received at the COP26 on this announcement. Over to you, Ashwin.
Thanks, Jaideep, and great to be with you. Look, COP26 is, as we know, just concluded, and I think we're still trying to process, was it a partial win or a partial loss? Have we really made significant progress as a global community on hitting the 1.5 or maintaining the 1.5 target as a realistic, achievable thing? The reality is that the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet was really a response to the need to bring the development aspirations and the low carbon needs of the planet together in one initiative. Efforts to protect the planet so far have largely excluded the energy needs and economic aspirations of billions of people in the developing world, right? I mean, we keep telling people you need to cut emissions. Actually, the reality is that billions of people need to consume more, not less energy. And the question is, how are you going to do that without destroying the planet, without completely losing grip of the 1.5 target? And this is the opportunity that we brought to COP. Was there is a chance for the first time in history, frankly, to leverage all of the gains that we've seen in technology to dramatically expand access to clean energy, to renewable energy that can transform the lives and livelihoods of billions of people, while also making a tangible impact on protecting the planet from the worst impacts of climate change. The developing world today, excluding China, accounts for about 25% of global emissions. By 2050, in a business as usual scenario, we predict that will be about 75%. So the low energy consumers of today are going to be the high energy consumers of tomorrow. So how do we create a value proposition that brings clean energy to people much more urgently, while also keeping the planet on track for addressing climate change? So, this is what we launched at COP26, this Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, which has been, years in the making, actually, if you think about it. But certainly over the last 9 months, an intensive process of working with a set of partners. You mentioned our core philanthropic partners, IKEA Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, of course, and the Bezos Earth Fund, who came together to provide an initial base of about $1.5 billion of grant capital, which is sort of precious investment that we need to be able to leverage other types of capital, other types of investments, pointing towards projects that can serve low-income, underserved, under-electrified or unelectrified communities in Asia, Africa, Latin America. And these are projects that need a lot of support. They need a lot of technical support, they need a lot of political support, and they need a lot of investment support. So we brought a package of at least $10 billion. In addition to the philanthropic capital, we have almost a dozen multilateral and DFI, development finance institutions, coming together who are inspired by what the Alliance is trying to do to bring something tangible to COP. And we launched it there. And so the response has been incredible, frankly, because a lot of the conversation at COP26, and I was there, Joseph was there as well, was about the world not delivering tangible packages of finance to developing nations. Lots of lectures on how they need to reduce emissions, no capital, no investment to actually make that happen. And here we have an alliance that is trying to break through that bottleneck. So we had an incredible response from dozens of developing nations who were there, LDCs, least developed countries, and some of the middle-income countries who also need help with bigger challenges like transitioning fossil fuel and coal, for example. We launched, as you rightly described, the call for transformational country partnerships, and we talk about the word partnership rather than just projects, because we really feel that that's the starting point. So it's an invitation to 80 plus countries who we see as energy poor, but nonetheless important in terms of the energy transition question, offering a package of support from sort of proposal development, project development, technical work, work on regulatory reforms, all of the sort of boring but essential things that have to happen to get a market moving, but also then linking that to actual financing. So providing different types of capital that can help de-risk these complicated, not always fully commercial projects, but to bring them to market with the assistance of concessional capital. So we've just issued the launch. We're gathering expressions of interest. We'll launch the process, start receiving applications from December 1st. And we expect, to choose a partner with at least 20 countries in through the course of the next 12 months to help them develop concrete, large transformational projects that they can then take forward over the coming years. So it's an exciting start. We have a lot of work to do still. So we're just getting going in that sense. But it was really encouraging to see the response.
Yeah. Thank you, Ashwin, for that. I mean, this is certainly a big commitment for us, and it'll be interesting to see the impact unfolding in the regions that the Alliance will work in, the countries and all the partners. Now, turning to Africa, Joseph, you were at COP, right in the thick of action, meeting all the African delegations and heads of state. How do you feel, and how do you see the Alliance's journey unfolding in Africa?
Thank you, Jaideep, and it's nice to be here as well. COP was an interesting series of meetings, and as Ashwin has summarized, a lot of big announcements and promises, and the real resources. I think the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet really brought concrete resources to the table. And it was very well received by the Africa delegations. Look, in Africa, we have over 500 million Africans who don't have access to electricity. That's well over 50% of Africans. And if you go to the rural areas, that's well over 70% of Africans who don't have access to electricity. There's also key concern around climate mitigation. Africa will be largely impacted by climate change, even when Africa has not played a huge role in causing the pollution that is leading to climate change. And so there's a lot of concern, and there's also a concern on the climate change, and there's also the need for electrification. What is exciting coming out of COP, and particularly with the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet in mind, is the opportunity to leverage knowledge and experiences, some of it emerging from the subcontinent of Asia, that we can apply towards the continent to address this climate and energy access challenge. Do you see it happening that way in Asia, Jaideep?
Yeah. Yes, thanks, Joseph, for your impressions. Yeah, speaking of Asia, it's an interesting situation, and in where it is different from Africa is that many of the countries have progressed a great deal in terms of access, but still the larger part of the energy mix is dependent on fossil fuels, coal, diesel. For instance, take two of the world's largest island nation countries, Indonesia and Philippines. While they have high levels of access, the countries are still heavily reliant on coal and diesel. There is a large population in remote geographies there, which still has unelectrified. And this is where GAP provides, there is a great play for GAP to not only accelerate the replacement or transition from the conventional energy sources, but particularly for the island grids, the renewable DRE, renewable solutions can be a great way for a quick transition in these countries. Coming to India, India boasts of 100% household electrification. Rural areas still continue to struggle with poor quality electricity, and enterprises are heavily diesel dependent. Again, here we see opportunity for the alliance to accelerate reliability, transition from diesel dependence, and that our DRE programs like the on-grid mini-grid program is already beginning to make a big impact on the ground. And new programs like the CNI rooftop solution poised to be launched is another way that we can accelerate the energy transition. But then the ambition for the alliance is to also accelerate the larger grid scale transition from the fossil fuel towards a cleaner pathway, because we have to address the growth into a green pathway and the existing carbon footprint to make it cleaner. So we have to adopt this twin-pronged approach in Asia, both the DRE-led and the large grid-based transition.
We met when I was at COP. We met with the Indonesian delegation actually a couple of times. And so, since you mentioned Indonesia, it's really interesting what they are eager to do. They've got, as you said, there's something like 62% of their electricity is generated via coal. So that's an important part of their economy. But they recognize that they have to go through a transition and that they need to bring that percentage down. But they need to do it without destroying jobs, without undermining the economy, and they need to do it with a commensurate increase in installed capacity of renewables coming in alongside that. So we had several conversations with them about how the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet could partner with the government of Indonesia, with the Asian Development Bank and others to try some innovations in this area. Can you actually accelerate the decommissioning of existing coal assets? So let's say you have a coal-fired power plant that has got a 30 or 40-year life cycle remaining. There are some really interesting sort of models being developed to say, okay, there's a way to bring that down to 10 or 15 or 20 years, so at least half the life of that coal plant. So you're not just saying, stop it tomorrow, because that would be economically unviable. But can you create some financing incentives to essentially accelerate the closure of a plant that would otherwise potentially run for 40 years? And you can then very specifically quantify what impact that will have on carbon. Now, all of that it's going to take political support. It's going to take financing support, because you are essentially trying to discount a future cash flow of a privately owned or publicly owned coal-fired power plant and create an incentive to the owners to say, look, shut this down 20 years earlier. And to do that is going to take some innovative financing structuring, it's going to take some flexible capital, and it's going to take a lot of political will. But it seems like, to me, like the message from the Indonesians was, they're really, really interested in exploring this if they can get the right kinds of support for them to do that. A point will come where coal becomes economically obsolete, and we're probably not that far away from that point. So, I'm less worried about, 5 years from now, will somebody be investing in a new coal power plant? Probably not. But we have massive amounts of installed, and in some cases, quite a young fleet of coal-fired power plants around the world. And we need something innovative to try and deal with that challenge. So it's really interesting to see how the Indonesians showed up at COP and how committed they seem to be to tackle what is a pretty politically difficult issue. Because when we talk about accelerating the closure of something like a 500 megawatt coal plant, there's the whole question of the just transition. Do you bring risks to jobs associated with that power plant? Are you sure you can maintain the level of energy supply to industry and businesses? So I really congratulate the sort of stance that they've taken on this, and we're looking forward to partnering with them to see what we can do together.
It's interesting you mentioned the energy transition agenda.
Sure, Joseph, go ahead.
Thank you. It's interesting you mentioned the energy transition agenda. Looking at the continent and what's emerging there in Africa, Nigeria presents another energy transition example where there is a significant amount of household, small business, industrial installed diesel generators to back up the unreliable or even in some instances unavailable electricity grid. And what we're seeing from that perspective really is the government of Nigeria has committed to net zero by 2060. And that means that there's a lot of work that needs to be done towards decommissioning, if I may call it that, these household level industrial and small business generators. And the conversation is very similar towards ensuring that the transition is a just transition, so people have an alternative. If you're not providing diesel generators, how are these local enterprises going to run? How are hospitals and schools going to run? And can they run on clean energy that's also affordable, that secures jobs and protects the environment? We're seeing a lot of interest from the government of Nigeria to work with the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet to model how this would look, to put together the business plan for how this could be funded, and then to work alongside the government towards policies, regulations that drive this very ambitious goal. Over to you, Jaideep.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Ashwin. This whole subject of just transition is such an important piece, and I think this is where the philanthropies, through the alliance that have come together, can play possibly a big role in catalyzing and designing and enabling a just transition, because just from the lens that the philanthropies have towards the communities that get impacted by this. So I think it's going to be a very important angle in this whole transition piece, where the alliance can have a big role to play. But Ashwin, given this context, the variety of nations, countries, and at various stages and political positions, where you have Indonesia, which has clearly got a very granular game plan laid out and is out there seeking support and participation. And you have, countries in Africa, again, a wide spectrum from Malawi to Nigeria. Joseph, you have a very wide spectrum, and to, work with and, get them on the right path. What do you think in this context, Ashwin, the challenges that we should anticipate and your thoughts on the way forward?
No, you're absolutely, you're right. Look, the alliance is taking a very broad approach, right? And I think therein lies a challenge. We're not trying to come up with a one size fits all. We're not saying it's just fossil fuel decommissioning or it's just distributed renewable electrification or it's just grid based. It's like it has to be a combination of these things, and it has to be driven by the demand of an individual country. What the alliance is doing is it'll design, it'll finance, and it'll help execute renewable energy programs across a spectrum of very different countries. Malawi, which Joseph knows very well, has something like 11, 12, 13% electrification. So the starting point for them is much more around how do we actually expand access? How do we unleash the full potential of distributed renewable energy technologies in a country that is going to struggle to electrify the nation using traditional grid infrastructure and grid extension? I had a fascinating interaction with the delegation of the Democratic Republic of Congo when I was at COP26, and met with the president and his delegation, talking about how do you electrify large cities. So we talk about DRE and mini grids, and we tend to think about very small scale 30, 40 kilowatt systems electrifying a small village. Here, there are towns that have 150,000 people in them that are completely off the grid, that are essentially energized through a sort of a patchwork of small and mid-sized generators and kerosene and a lot of wood. And this is a country that is one of the major basins for carbon with the forests there. So we talk about metro grids, which are larger scale, 5, 6, 7, up to 10 megawatt systems that are renewable energy based, solar in the large part, but they could be other technologies. So the challenge is really managing that spread, that scope. The idea that we're not just trying to come up with a single solution for a typical country, but that every country is going to need a bespoke offering. The thing that we're trying to do to kind of to address that challenge is to work with each country, sort of secure head of state commitment to really embed a country-led visioning exercise for what we call a national transformational program or project, which is what are the one or two things that you can drive at scale to address the access and carbon challenge that you're facing, and through that also create and unleash significant numbers of good, clean, and green jobs. So perhaps in a country like DRC, it's how do you electrify 25 or 30 of these cities of 150,000 people plus over the next 5 years, and what would it take to get that done? That's the opportunity and the challenge of the alliance, right? Is you've got an amazing range of organizations coming under the umbrella of the alliance saying, we want to take these kinds of large-scale challenges and get the job done much more quickly than we would otherwise be able to do if we were not coordinating under the alliance. So get that head of state commitment, identify the national transformational program, deliver quickly and flexibly the kind of technical support that you need to get the initial policies and regulations in place for putting out tenders and bidding documents and things like that. Do the project development work, and then very crucially, bring together the capital that's going to be needed, because some of these systems are going to need a combination of highly concessional and commercial capital to get this going. So I think we've raised the profile of the alliance. We've offered a pathway to engage with countries. And so honestly, the challenge now is execution, is we have to really be able to follow through. And I'm convinced we will, because I think the DNA of this alliance is around country-led work and really, yourselves in Asia and Joseph and his team in Africa, making sure that we partner effectively and really, move away from sort of business as usual to getting these kinds of projects moving much, much more quickly.
Yeah, it's going to be an audacious endeavor Joseph, you want to add anything, or how are you feeling about this execution? The rubber is about to hit the road now.
Indeed, the rubber must hit the road, but it is time, and there is a sense of urgency with the climate crisis, with the need for energy access, so nobody's left behind. So yes, the challenge is enormous, but we have to step up and meet the moment. And as Ashwin mentions, it's really a very integrated way of thinking about electrification, providing energy access and climate. I would add that as we think about the policies, the regulations, and then how to finance these projects, we are also spending a lot of time looking at jobs and looking at how that power will then be used to drive economic development. So we strongly believe that supporting ideas around demand, whether it's demand at the mini grid level, it's at the municipal grid level, it's at the national level, this power, as it's generated and transmitted to the consumers, should be used to drive economic development, which will then ensure that it's a sustainable sector while also improving people's lives. So actually, the climate crisis also presents an opportunity for us to address that crisis in a way that also leaves people in a much better position than they were before. So yes, execute. We feel the pressure, but we also feel the excitement and the opportunity to really make a difference.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashwin and Joseph. We are all very excited to be part of this unique and ambitious endeavor. Thank you to all the listeners for joining us on the first episode of Flip the Switch. Stay tuned for more exciting updates on power, people, and planet. You can follow us on our social media channels for more. See you again next time. Thank you. Bye now.
Flip the Switch, your podcast for the latest on power, people, and the planet.